Hi, everybody. My name is Shmuley Hecht. I'm one of the founders of Shabtai. I just want to thank God for this extraordinary evening tonight. I would like to thank each and every one of you that came out tonight. This was a short notice event that turned out to be an extraordinary evening. So each and every one of you that took time out of your day to come spend a few hours with us tonight for an important discussion is cherished and appreciated by all of us here at Shabtai and in the Yale community. Of course, I'd like to thank all the faculty members that are here, the notable faculty members that are here tonight, and of course, Jed and soon Amy, professors Jed Rubenfeld and Amy Chua, for being here tonight. We're honored to have you, and I just thought I would tell everybody that I actually emailed Professor Rubenfeld a couple of weeks ago, and I said, "What do you think of free speech?" And he said, "I'm very pro-free speech." I said, "Good, you're going to give a free speech at Shabtai next week." And so that's why we're here. Okay. So that's that. Now you can do the bio.
All right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Professor Jed Rubenfeld. Professor Jed Rubenfeld is a professor of law at Yale Law School. His subjects are constitutional law, privacy, First Amendment, and criminal law. His recent books include Freedom and Time and Revolution by Judiciary, The Structure of American Constitutional Law. Professor Rubenfeld received his A.B. from Princeton and his J.D. from Harvard. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Rubenfeld.
You know, I'm so honored to be here. I will. I'm so honored, particularly by the fact there's just so many people here. I can hardly believe it. And I feel very privileged. And, you know, I want to thank Shmuley and Toby especially. I've never been in this building. It's spectacularly beautiful, and what a beautiful dinner. And I can see already, although it's my first time here, that what you're doing here at the law school through Shabtai, you're creating an environment where people are really going to have serious conversations and talk to each other. And I hate to say it, but at Yale University, that's just shocking. So thank you for that. Now, I've been instructed to go stand in that corner. By the way, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Sure? Okay. So I'm supposed to go in the corner, so you probably won't be able to hear me when I get there. There is no, we have mics that are recorded.
There's no amplification of the mic. The mic is only for the video purposes.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
No. Kate, you're shaking your head no? No, you cannot. Okay, I'll try to speak louder then. Well, all of you are going to disagree with some things I say tonight, and some of you are going to disagree with all things I say tonight. But you know, that's kind of the point of free speech, right? I'm not here to say things that everybody's going to agree with. So that's not going to happen. Now, my theme tonight is going to be never give up, never give in. But wait, I just want to. This is Jewish Voice for Peace, right? That's where I am. No, it's okay. Just checking to make sure I'm in the right place. Okay, So the topic, as you can tell from the title of the talk, is free speech and genocide. More specifically, what does free speech law say? How should you think about the freedom of speech when all around you, not just thousands of miles away, but here at home, people are praising and celebrating and sometimes calling for the slaughter and rape and mutilation of innocent people for many of the folks sitting in this room of your people, praising and calling for the murder and burning of your children. What are we supposed to think about free speech, and what does free speech have to say when that's happening? Now, that's a constitutional law question, in part, and I will get to that, I promise you. But before getting to the law. You can't talk about the law on something like this without first dealing with some of the deeper problems that are specific to this moment. So I'm going to address two such problems. Number one, the attack on language itself, which makes freedom of speech very difficult. I am talking about the fact, and some of you have heard me say this before, that you all are living in a world of doublespeak, where things are called the opposite of what they are. The movement that calls itself anti-fascist is fascist. In fact, it's the only serious fascist movement we have in the United States. A lot of the movement that calls itself anti-racist is racist. What is called inclusion is often exclusion. What is called equity is often inequity. The people screaming loudest against genocide are, in fact, often justifying, praising, sometimes calling for genocide. So doublespeak is invidious. It's corrupting of language itself. It's hard to communicate when that's the world you're living in. This is going to be a problem for the younger people here, more than the older folks, because that's your world. Hard to communicate, almost impossible to have an argument. So what do? Well, there's only one thing you can do. Don't give up. Call things by their name. Make the arguments, even when it seems like nobody's listening. You can't be understood. Make the arguments anyway. Because, as my friend Barry Weiss says, you all are in the fight of your lives. And calling things by their real names, believe it or not, is part of how you can serve. Second problem is, of course, October 7th. And the emotional toll it takes on so many of you here. Who among us hasn't seen friends or family breaking down into sobs at the horror and shock of the videos, photos, descriptions, and the monsters jubilating as they murder, rape, and parade victims in the streets? Well, I have some advice about that. I'm here to tell you, you better stop your sobbing. And you better get over your shock. How can we be shocked after all? You know, the Jews in this room, we've been told since every year, once a year, because it's in our Haggadah, since before we can remember, that in every generation they will rise up to destroy us. I remember when I first heard that, I thought, oh my God, what a paranoid people I've been born into, I'm a member of. But as in the old joke, well, we might be paranoid, but that doesn't mean they're all out to kill us all over the world. Folks are going to say, you don't understand, Professor. What we're shocked at isn't the attacks themselves. We're shocked at the reaction to the attacks. We're shocked by the international community, the New York Times, the universities. Our universities aren't keeping us safe. Oh, you're shocked about that. Oh, please. If you're surprised by the anti-Semitism in the international community, at the UN, where just recently Iran was named to a leading position at the High Commission of Human Rights, how many people knew that? Wake up if you're surprised to find anti-Semitism there, or at Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch. If you're surprised by anti-Semitism at the New York Times, I kind of was. Well, wake up. It's there. And if you're surprised by the anti-Semitism on our campuses, you've been living with your head in the sand for the last 5 or 10 years. But you don't understand, Professor. It's the left and the young people here in America. The majority of them actually support Hamas over Israel. That's what we can't understand. That's what shocks us. How can that be? How can that be? Because they hate Israel with a passion, a righteous passion that you don't understand. And you may never understand. Well, but at least you're saying they hate Israel, but not Jews, right? They hate Israel, but not Jews. No, they hate Jews too. Many of them. Not all. Not close to all. But wake up. Many of them do. Listen to what they say. You all know what they mean when they say Zionist. We all know what they mean. And they don't bother even saying Zionist anymore. It's Gas the Jews being chanted on the streets of Sydney, Australia. It's, Fuck the Jews being chanted on the streets of New York City a couple weeks ago. But how, Professor, how can they hate us when we're the people of Tikkun Olam trying to repair the world? You got to stop with that. I'm sorry. If we're going to call things by their names, we got to be honest about ourselves too. Forgive me, but Jews have to stop with the whole repairing the world business. Don't flatter yourselves. We're no better or worse than anybody else. We're no more moral or less moral than anybody else. We're just as self-interested as anybody else. Never give up trying to do what's right. If you stop doing that, you won't be Jews anymore. But understand, you will be wrong about what you think is right just as often as anyone else. And understand, above all, you are not on a mission to save the world. Sorry, you're on a mission to save yourselves. And the world is not going to help. The universities will not help you. They will not keep you safe. The international community will not save you. Now you're going to get more annoyed at what I'm saying. But then folks are going to say, well, but why do they hate us? Is it because we're so successful? Is that why they hate us? I can't stand that either. I can't stand hearing Jews say that. We're so wealthy and successful. That must be why they hate us. Let me tell you who's not wealthy and successful. The ultra-Orthodox. Do you know that the ultra-Orthodox are among the poorest communities in the whole United States? The poorest? Well, guess what? They hate them just as much as they hate all the other Jews, maybe more. And besides, in general, I'd say this. Do not try to impute their hatred to any characteristics Jews supposedly have or don't have. That's just playing into their game. It's just the flip side of them saying, oh, they hate us because we control everything. Can you all at the end of the room still hear me, or have you lost me? So you know what I'd say? You're not going to like this. I'm sorry to be so heartless about it at a time when Jews are facing a level of persecution and actual threat greater than anything, for most of us, that we've ever seen in our lifetimes. I'm sorry to say it, but stop feeling so special about being hated. Remember, we're not the only ones that they hate. You know who else they hate, along with Israel and Jews? America and Americans. They don't feel too swell about America and Americans, do they? Don't forget, sorry to say it, don't forget that the Palestinians jubilated after 9/11. And you must have heard about the pro-Bin Laden letter craze that swept TikTok just a couple weeks ago. You all know what I'm talking about, right? Big deal on TikTok for young Americans. Same movement right here at home that teaches hate for Israel also teaches hate for America. And in fact, for the whole West, the whole colonizer West. And it's this broader movement, not anti-Semitism specifically, it's this broader movement we need to understand. Because you cannot win a war if you don't know what the war is about. So, what is that broader movement about? I'm just checking the time here. How am I doing on that? What is that broader movement about? Well, here's a story that a lot of you have probably been told about what that broader movement, that broader ideology is about. Let me see if you've heard this. I'm talking about the story being told by people not in that movement about that movement. Here's what we're told. The progressive ideology that is capturing and driving all this hatred, it's simple. They have divided the world into oppressors and oppressed. White people in America and the West are the oppressors, and they include, Jews as white people, and people of color are the oppressed. That's the ideology the left is pushing. That's what we've got to fight. How many people have heard that account? Well, let's think about that a little more carefully and put aside the irony of the Jewish position here. I mean, Jews being hated because they're white. Might as well go tell Adolf Hitler that. Because if you might remember, he hated us and wanted to kill us because we weren't white. But it's taken as settled by the new Nazis and their collaborators that we are white. And put aside a second irony. Remember the good old days when the left thought that the concept of race was a social construction? You remember that? Well, now they've created the biggest social construct of all time. People of color. What the heck is that? Put aside all that. The story you've been told, as I just described it, I don't think that's what's really going on. So I'm going to tell you a different story about what's really going on. And I think we have to start out being a little fairer to identity politics. Now, no one could be more against identity politics than I am. But you got to be fair to it because it's important to try to understand what the heck is going on. For a long time, over a century, in Europe and America, the left was all about economics, wealth redistribution, wealth inequality, exploitation of labor. Those were the main concerns of the left. The central concerns till right around 1960. Then something happened. The left turned away from inequality of wealth and instead began to focus on group inequalities of status and respect and dignity. Some groups were looked down on and subordinated because of their race or sex or religion or ethnicity. And as a result, these subordinated groups were subject to discrimination socially, culturally, and in the workplace. And there was a transformation in leftism from a concern about wealth inequality as public enemy number one to status inequality as public enemy number one. Thus was born identity politics and the Civil Rights Revolution and the anti-discrimination revolution. And that was a very good thing for America. Because there was, of course, so much identity-based discrimination. And the left, for its part, had been blind to it, hadn't cared about it. Hadn't cared about racism or women's rights or Hispanic rights or gay rights and so forth. So that's how identity politics was born. That's how it begins. And you have to remember what was right about it and why it was so important. But here's what happens as that movement grows and spreads and becomes dominant and succeeds. It gets taken over, and it undergoes its own transformation. The first thing is it's quickly latched onto by the rich. Rich people and rich corporations. Why is that? Because it diffuses and diffuses the attack on their wealth. They can show how great and noble and leftist they are without giving up a dime. It's the greatest thing ever. All they got to do is embrace the new identitarianism. You mean we can be leftist and we don't? It doesn't cost us anything. We just have to say how much we're against discrimination and transphobia and sexism and hire fewer white guys? And if we do, they'll let us increase wealth equality in this country to levels not seen since the Gilded Age? This is the best thing ever. And then it gets even better, because not only does it not cost them a dime, they figure out how to monetize it. They can do DEI and ESG and make trillions of dollars off it. World's greatest thing. All while donning the mantle of social justice warrior at Davos. But more fundamentally, internally, what happens to this movement? What happens to the new identitarianism gets so successful, it just can't stop. It's working too well, politically, socially, ideologically. The new left is crushing it. But because of its own success, the terrain it finds itself on has less and less overt discrimination to attack. There's too many examples of people rising up from discriminated against groups, doing well, becoming president. Now, there's tons and tons of discrimination still in America. But there's not as much as there was before. And that becomes a problem for this movement. Finding fewer and fewer examples of overt discrimination, it has to find something different, which it calls microaggressions, that are supposedly just as bad as overt discrimination, maybe even worse, because it's hidden. Has to find structural or systemic discrimination or racism that's just as bad as overt discrimination, maybe worse, because it's hidden. It has to find new and hidden forms of sexual victimization that are just as bad as overt violent sexual assault, maybe even worse, because hidden. Then it has to twist itself like a pretzel and start calling expressly for discrimination, for racial discrimination, in the present to cure racial discrimination in the past. And that's not all. It's still just the surface. What society calls merit, that also has to be condemned as racist and sexist. What society calls beauty, that is also invidious and racist and sexist. What society calls freedom is white supremacy and sexual subordination. What society calls achievement is domination. And guess what? There are always strands of truth in this critique. Just enough to keep it going. Just enough to keep it going until we have a movement that has become what Nietzsche called an inversion of values. What did he mean by that? The key tenet of the kind of movement that Nietzsche called an inversion of values is simple. All that society holds out as good is in fact evil. That's the chief tenet of such a movement. Now, Nietzsche saw Christianity, all of Christianity, as such an inversion of values. But don't worry, he blamed Christianity on the Jews, so it's okay, we get the most blame and we're the most reviled. And by the way, this is why Nietzsche is so important today, because his diagnosis, he got something right. It's also why he is so dangerous, because the right wing, is going to be drawn to him like moths to a flame. Now, you know, in characterizing the left this way, as I have, you know I am talking about the extreme. I'm not talking, there's so many good and decent people who are progressives. You know I am talking about the extreme left. But you know, on the other hand, that the extremes on both sides are getting to be more mainstream. Every day, the extreme is being normalized and taught in our colleges and in our high schools and in our elementary schools. So it's important to understand the extreme. And according to what I've been telling you, here's one way to understand it. It's determined to find evil and racism and sexism and so on in all, or almost all, that society holds high and worthy: merit, beauty, freedom, achievement, prosperity, equal opportunity, mental health, masculinity, femininity, and so on, and all the institutions that uphold these metrics and values. So here's what I'm saying. It's kind of Nietzschean, so forgive me. The extreme left is a revolt by those who are or believe themselves to be perceived as lower, less worthy, subordinate according to society's metrics and institutions. The new progressive ideology sees disrespect and unequal regard and unequal outcomes everywhere because they are everywhere. And it calls these things evil. It calls them oppression. But this is where you must not be fooled, because it's not, this movement, about fighting oppression. They call it that, but don't buy into that. Because in an inversion of values, the people making war on society's values and institutions aren't interested in fighting oppression at all. That's what they say, but it's not true. Those who hate and resent society's hierarchies and feel lower and subordinate and subordinated, they don't really want to equalize. That's not how these movements work. They want to be the ones who are higher. They want to be the ones doing the subordinating. That's what you have to understand about the present moment. They don't actually care. It was all not true from the beginning. They don't actually care about protecting identity groups from threat and being demeaned and violence. They don't care about that, long as they're the ones doing it. All the talk about being anti-colonizer, of achieving safe spaces, of only wanting peace or an end to violence, of making everyone feel included, it was and is all BS. Anti-colonizer, please. If they were really anti-colonizer, they'd have to be as against Islam as they are against the West, because Islam was one of the great conquering, colonizing empires. Hats off. Against microaggressions, please. The same people and entities who railed against microaggressions, they're now praising and perpetrating real aggression, actual violence. It was never real. Don't be taken in. Safe spaces on campus for beleaguered identity groups? Come on. They're happy to make an identity group feel unsafe. And not just feel unsafe, actually be unsafe. As long as it's the identity group they don't like. You know who I'm talking about. Believe all women. Suddenly, the groups that were saying that most loudly, most vociferously, most strong, they have fallen silent at the evidence of documented rape in Israel. I repeat, so this is being videotaped, but I have already gotten permission. I've already gotten an agreement that they can't post this anywhere unless I agree, because I'm in huge trouble already. You think I've been canceled already? I'm going to be fired for this talk.
Professor Rubenfeld, you're live on CNBC.
I repeat, it was never real. It was all hypocrisy from the get-go. What's really going on is not a fight for social justice. but an attempt to tear down what society holds out as high and good. Its history, its prized institutions, the stuff it most prides itself on. Which brings me back at last to the Constitution. Because if I'm right that the fight you're in is a fight, an assault on the unifying institutions that America most prides itself on, well then there ought to be a rejection of the Constitution. It's kind of a test case for this theory, actually. Is there constitutional rejectionism? Is that happening today? Sadly, yes, it is. So I'm in law school, I'm a law school professor, constitutional law professor. I can tell you, sadly, unfortunately, yes. For decades, and I've been at the law school for decades, the Constitution was the one thing that held all Yale law students together, left and right. They disagreed about what the Constitution meant. Everybody thought what it meant was what they believed in. That is, the Constitution supported their beliefs. Everybody thought that, left and right. So they disagreed ferociously about what the Constitution meant, but they made their arguments in terms of the Constitution. It was really important to everybody to say, no, the Constitution's on my side. And that was a great time, great period, because it was still Americans being held together on both sides of the aisle and believing in the Constitution and arguing about it. But that's not how things are anymore. Increasingly, on both the left and the right, there is constitutional rejectionism. The Constitution's broken and it should not be fixed. On the left, the usual story is the Constitution was written by racist white men, and its freedoms, particularly freedom of speech, is just white supremacy. That is what people, some people at the law school will say about the Constitution. And by the way, as I just mentioned, the right is turning against the Constitution too. That's too long a story for me to tell right now, right here, but it's important, it's happening too. The lesson, though, the takeaway is this: the Constitution today is under threat, a greater threat than I've ever seen it in my lifetime. And it falls to you, the people in this room, to defend it. Yes, that's what I'm saying. It falls to you, each and every one of you. So what should we do then when people praise Hamas and support genocidal maniacs through a double-speak rhetoric that's hypocrisy and a social justice rhetoric that is hypocrisy? What should we do? Well, we should condemn them and expose their hypocrisy and defend their freedom of speech. Do not give up on it. Never give in to what they do and what they want, which is to destroy the freedom of speech and the other constitutional freedoms that make this country what it is. Let me talk then about some specifics at last about freedom of speech and what's going on around you. I'll talk about 3 specific issues. They'll all have to do with campus speech because, that's where we are, closest to home. First specific issue: what about the university's own speech? The letters they wrote, the responses after October the 7th. Well, you all know what happened. They didn't say anything. Here at Yale, a letter was issued saying, we're heartbroken. We're heartbroken. Forgive me. Okay. Institutions don't have hearts and they're not broken. They didn't say terrorist. It took them 3 days before our president used the word terrorist. Our dean at the law school, she hadn't said a word till President Salovey finally, 3 days after October 7th, said the word terrorist, and then she issued a statement saying, she was gratified by President Salovey's statement using the word terrorist. So what to say about all that? Well, point 1, universities have a right to their own opinion. They're as protected by the First Amendment as you and I are. Point 2, they also have a right not to express an opinion. They could adopt a position of neutrality on all political controversies. They could do that. In fact, I'd be in favor of that. Chicago, University of Chicago purportedly does that. I think that's a good thing, probably, in our polarized state position of neutrality. But point three, as we all know, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, all the great universities, they have not adopted that position of neutrality. They have repeatedly, ostentatiously taken public positions condemning this, denouncing that. Yale denounced Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. Our dean at Yale, at the law school, 30 seconds after the Supreme Court issued a decision ruling affirmative action unconstitutional, issued a decision denouncing that case. 30 seconds. Denouncing it as racist and an assault on democracy. In other words, our universities have not hesitated to take position after position denouncing what they see as grave moral evils. So when they didn't denounce October 7th as a grave moral evil, when for days and days they don't call it terrorism, they send a pretty clear message. Deny it though they might, they send the message that with respect to this set of events, there's enough moral complexity or historical complexity so that reasonable people could differ. Reasonable people could see resistance, not terrorism. Reasonable people could think it was justified to slaughter, rape, mutilate, and burn children alive. And that's a hell of a message. Did their silence embolden those who came a little later and started explicitly to justify Hamas and the atrocities and blame the Jews for the violence against the Jews? Did it embolden? Maybe. Probably. Was it anti-Semitic? Probably not. In many cases, absolutely not. It was just spinelessness. It was just cowardice. Like Yale University's response to the Christakis fiasco a few years ago. How many people know what I'm talking about? So no, it's not anti-Semitic, but it's still morally rotten to its core. Reprehensible all the same. Well, so what do we do about it? Well, first, recognize it. People are finally waking up to how bad things have gotten, how rotten, morally rotten things are at our universities, and that's a good thing. Some donors are taking action. But you know what? Harvard and Yale and Princeton, they are so rich, beyond comprehension, that they actually don't even care so much about their donors. Did you know that? Their endowments are so big. So, by the way, if you want to get them where it hurts, you should be leading movements to tax their endowment, which is perfectly constitutional. That would terrify them. Tax their property. That would terrify them. That would get their attention. Second specific issue. Whether professors and students that have praised Hamas should be disciplined, fired, or expelled. Yalees for Palestine issued a statement on October 8th, one day after October 7th, October 8th, unequivocally supporting Hamas and the monstrosities of that day. We have a professor here, as you all know, at Yale, who immediately went on social media to praise, justify, and celebrate the atrocities of October 7th. She called it an extraordinary day. She said that all Israelis are legitimate kill targets for Hamas. You all know that's what Professor Graywall said. Every Israeli man, woman, and child is a legitimate kill target. She said it wasn't even a hard issue, because what she said was, settlers are not civilians. You all know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. That's what that means. They're all legitimate kill targets. So that's, okay, I'm biased, I'm Jewish, but to me, that's bloodthirsty, that's homicidal, that's in fact genocidal. Hard to describe it any other way. That's how I see it. And tens of thousands have called for her to be fired. Should she be? No, she should not. Well, let me say, in case anybody doesn't know this, that Yale and Harvard and Princeton, these are private universities. They're not bound by the Constitution. The Constitution First Amendment only applies against governmental actors in this country. Okay? So, constitutionally speaking, they can do whatever they want. They could fire her. They could fire her for her opinions. But they should not. Why? Because they have pledged themselves to respecting the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression. And that is a great thing at our great universities. They have pledged themselves through the idea, the institution of tenure, to the principle that professors can say whatever they believe to be true, whatever opinion they believe to be true, and they cannot be punished for it. And by the way, this Professor Graywall, although it was initially reported that she's an associate professor, and I don't actually know the facts on this, Yale Daily News says she's a full tenured professor. But whether she is or not, she should not be fired. The Yale Daily News, I got to mention this. In their story they did about Professor Graywall, they only quoted one tweet. They quoted a tweet where she called Israel genocidal and expressed in a general way solidarity with Hamas. They forgot to tweet the kill target. They forgot to quote the kill target tweet. They forgot to quote the tweet where she said it was an extraordinary day, October 7th. Never mind. That's all you need to know about the Yale Daily News. All the same, you can only shake your head in disgust at Yale's explanation of why they're not firing her. Here's what our president, Salovey, said. Yale is committed to freedom of expression, and the comments posted on Professor Graywall's personal accounts represent her own views. Now, why do I say you should be disgusted? Professor, I don't get it. Why are you disgusted by that? You just said Yale should support the freedom of expression. Yes, Yale should support the freedom of expression. But we know that for the last 5 years, they have not been. They have been Yale, Columbia, Harvard, Princeton, Penn. They have been firing and investigating and disciplining professors for much less offensive speech, and students too. There was a Columbia professor who posted something on social media praising the beauty of a Sudanese model. You could go look it up, decide for yourself you think it was racist. He lost all his positions, stripped of all of his positions. Should he have been? No. I'm not saying it. What I'm saying is, that's what they've been doing. Here at Yale Law School, there was a student just 2 years ago. He sent out a party invitation. He used the word trap house in the party invitation. Who's ever even heard of the word trap house? What the hell does it mean? It was immediately denounced as racist because of the use of the word trap house. And he was hauled in by the university administrators and accused of being racist and told he must apologize for his racist invitation or they would destroy his career. They would send a message to the Connecticut Bar Association telling him, alerting them that, he'd sent this racist email. And the school sent out an email to the entire community, approved, apparently, by the dean herself, saying they denounced his racist email, his invitation. Now, you cannot call a student's email racist in this country without threatening his whole career. But they did that to this student for using the word trap house, and now, suddenly, they're committed to the freedom of expression, so they can't do anything? I don't think they should do anything, but I'm disgusted by Salovey's statement. And I will be fired when you post this against my wishes. So naturally, we're tempted to say, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If they're going after those people, you gotta, she should be fired. They should fire this Professor Graywall. And I say to you, do not give in. Do not give up. The freedom of speech needs your support now more than ever. If today you succeed in getting this Professor Graywall fired because of her support for Hamas, do you know who will be fired tomorrow? It's the professors who support Israel. It's the students who support Israel. They will be hauled in. They will be forced to attend mandatory sensitivity training sessions or something like that. And you will not have a leg to stand on. So you've got to defend her freedom of speech. You have to defend the freedom of speech when it counts, when you hate the stuff that people are saying. Because if you only defend it when you agree with what they're saying, then it doesn't count at all. Third issue, whether it's okay for these law firms, because did you know law firms are announcing, we're not hiring these people. We're not hiring these students at these law schools who've been taking these pro-Hamas positions. We're not gonna hire them. Is that okay? Yes, that's okay. First of all, these private law firms, once again, to remind you, they are not covered by the First Amendment. They are not governmental actors, so they can do it, and they have not, like the great universities, pledged themselves to something like tenure, some idea that you get hired by them, you can say anything you want, and nothing will ever happen. You can express any opinion you want. That's not how law firms work. Just last year, a very important partner at a very fancy pants, prestigious law firm was reputedly pushed out of that law firm because of his work supporting the Second Amendment. Nobody thought that it was a huge free speech problem. He got pushed out because he was supporting a conservative position on the Second Amendment. Pushed out. And you know, all over America for the last 5 years, employees have been disciplined and fired in some cases for not towing the orthodox progressive line. You know that's been happening. You've been reading about it in the papers. So with that background, those who claim that law firms are violating the free speech rights of these pro-Hamas students, please. It's just the same BS again. It's just the same hypocrisy. Don't buy it. And you know, more fundamentally, it's very important. It's as a matter of the health of a free speech ecology, so to speak, that there has to be some accountability. If you can say anything you want and there's no accountability, well, guess what? Then people will say anything, and it will be horrible. And they might not even believe it. You know that many of the young people saying from the river to the sea, they don't know what it means. They don't know they're calling for Israel to be wiped off the map, and maybe all the Israelis who live there to be wiped off the map. They don't know that. There have to be consequences, some accountability. Don't discipline those students. Don't expel them. But if law firms say, we're not going to hire you, that's not a bad thing. It could make people think harder before they say anything. It could make people study a little bit. By the way, you know what else is a great value about the freedom of speech? That we know better what people believe. I didn't know that there was this Professor Graywall who had these views. That's a good thing to know that. If students sign up for her classes, that's a good thing to understand what they're signing up for. That's a value of the freedom of speech. That's very important. All right, I'm going to conclude, and I'm going to conclude just a couple of remarks. For the Jews in this room, you have a never again that is specific to this moment. It applies to what's happening around you. Your never again, what is it? Well, it's, as federal judge Roy Altman said recently, it's we'll never go back to the camps. That's why we fight. You will never send us back to the camps again. And that's why, for the Jews in this room, most of you probably feel loyalty to Israel. You should. And that's something you'll have to fight for, maybe in your own lives. But if you are also American, for all the Americans in this room, Jewish or non-Jewish, your first loyalty must be to America, to the United States, and to her Constitution. Because you, the young people in this room, you are America's last best hope, and America is the world's last best hope for freedom. So do not give up on the Constitution. Don't give in. Remember that hundreds of thousands have given their lives to create and defend the nation that we are so lucky to live in, so lucky to be a part of. So it's up to you to fight for, and I hope that you'll do so to your last breath. Okay, I'm done. All right. I've been told that told to finish at 9, which I've done, and I was told that we would have a half an hour of question and answer.
So thank you so much, Professor Rubenfeld, for your strong. Thank you so much, Professor Rubenfeld, for joining us and your strong and candid and forthcoming words, something that we don't see enough of at Yale. So without further ado, I'm just going to open it up for questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll pass you the microphone.
Hi.
Hello, Professor.
Just please speak up.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me in the back? Thank you. Let me preface by saying I'm not a law student, so excuse my ignorance for not knowing some legal concepts. But I'm more concerned about the university's responsibility to protect students who feel unsafe on campus. Putting aside the hypocrisy of those on the left that you point out. And one doctrine I'm interested in is the fighting words doctrine. And
Is what doctrine?
The fighting words doctrine.
Uh-huh.
And how over time the Supreme Court has narrowed the scope of it. And my concern is like speech, like let's say whether a student protester says anybody who punches a Jewish student or a student who supports Israel should do so, and if doing so, they're right in that situation. I'm concerned about like that type of speech. And recently, I believe it was like Quarterman v. Colorado, even the Supreme Court, in a way, allowed speech that look. I believe the case said that if an individual did the individual willingly mean to cause harm or break some type of law, and if they didn't, then that speech is justified under the First Amendment. And over time, like I said, like the fighting words doctrine has been narrowed. Isn't there a concern in that respect?
Okay, that's a great question. He's asking about sort of the constitutional law of what counts as free speech, what are the limits on it, because not all speech is protected by the Constitution. There's a couple of different legal categories that are important here. One is fighting words, as you mentioned, but that's kind of, that doctrine only applies to folks who have said something that gets them punched. Believe it or not, that's the fighting words doctrine. What I think you might really be asking about is the incitement doctrine. So you are not allowed to threaten somebody, even if you just use words. That's unprotected speech. You are not allowed to say things to incite other people to commit acts of violence imminently. That's called incitement. That's not protected speech. But a category of speech that has been made illegal recently that's actually probably more important, it's probably one you don't know about. It's under a statute called Title VI. And the idea is that if speech on a campus creates a hostile educational environment for a group, then that speech is unlawful too. And that's going to be the basis of all these lawsuits that people are already bringing. Have you been reading about this in the newspapers? A lot of people are bringing lawsuits against Harvard and Penn and Columbia saying you have allowed the creation of a hostile educational environment on your campus by not keeping people safe and stuff like that. That's where the action is going to be. if people go so far as to actually threaten somebody, that's a criminal offense. If they go so far as to incite people right around them to commit acts of violence, that's a criminal offense. But the legal action is more going to be on this hostile educational environment. And by the way, I'm very skeptical about that law because it's often used to turn the expression of political opinion into something unprotected and unlawful. But that's where the action is going to be. So follow those cases. Those cases are already being brought. These Title VI cases, one was just filed today against Harvard. Sorry. The administrative agency that handles Title VI announced that it has opened an investigation, again, did you read this? An open investigation against Harvard today for failing to keep its Jewish students safe in light of all the stuff that's happening right now that you all know about. So that's where the action is going to be, so keep your eye on that.
Hi, thank you so much for coming tonight. It was a very interesting talk. I'm interested, that was actually, my question was also going to be about the fighting words doctrine, but I'm interested in your sense of different scopes of free speech. You referenced education, both obviously in terms of higher education, but also high school and elementary school. Obviously, we've seen a lot of dialogue coming from politicians themselves, from corporate. You address sort of these different spheres. I'm interested what you think, outside of just sort of the public and private speech and the protections that we have in terms of that distinction, but sort of what the responsibility is of different organizations, whether that be especially educational organizations, but on different levels to sort of protect members of their community, to allow freedoms to members of their community. Just generally your take on that.
Well, a couple of things. Do not count on these institutions to protect you. They will not. It is just a mistake to be looking to I'm sorry to say it, whether you're Jewish or black or what, to be looking to these universities to protect you and keep you from threats and demeaning it. They could talk a big game. That's not where to look. So I caution you. I caution you about it. But yeah, of course they should. How can you go to school in an environment where you can be demeaned and threatened and you have to go run and hide and get locked into the library to keep you safe? You can't learn in that environment. But all I can tell you is, we could talk, they should protect us. You're going to hate this worse than anything I've said so far. It'd be better to learn how to fight. It'd be better to have self-defense classes taught. People say now they're really jumping off this train. What is he talking about? But it'd be wonderful if they protected us, but don't count on it. I'm not sure I'm answering your question. I also really didn't answer the question about fighting words. If you're really serious about that issue, so there is this doctrine called fighting words in United States constitutional law. What it means, if I say something that could get the person I'm talking to fight me, then my speech is not protected. But don't get confused about this. This only applies to people who are using incredibly personal, insulting epithets against somebody else so that that person has no choice but to take action against them. So that's not going to be I'm not sure you were asking about that, but it's not going to be as big an issue, the fighting words doctrine, as incitement, threats, and hostile educational environment, as I was saying before. I'm sorry if I have not answered your question well.
Thanks, Professor Rubenfeld. So I have a question about how we should understand where to draw the line between free speech and holding people accountable when it comes to questions like doxing. So
between free speech and
holding people accountable.
Holding people
On
accountable.
the one hand, tolerating different viewpoints. On the other hand, trying to, make sure that we're just trying to persuade people whatever it is, not tolerating completely crazy viewpoints. And when it comes to things like, there was a truck people have seen around and talked about, is going around with a lot of different students' names on it. How should we understand a phenomenon like that? It brings in not just people within the community, but potentially, crazy actors that nobody knows that might see messages and then react to it in unpredictable ways.
Yeah, that's a great question, Teddy. And then Kevin, I saw, was going to ask a question, so I think he should be next. Okay, so first of all, the freedom of speech in America means that the government can't take action against you. So you are not accountable in that sense. You are free from consequences in that sense. The government cannot punish you for expressing an opinion, period. They can't lock you up. They can't take any action against you. They're not supposed to be able to take any action against you for expressing an opinion that they or a majority or the government doesn't like. That's the fundamental principle of the American freedom of speech. The government cannot punish you for expressing your opinion. So you are free from consequences in that sense. The Constitution of the United States has never made you unaccountable with respect to what private non-governmental actors do, whether it's another person or a company that doesn't hire you. The Constitution doesn't say that you're free from consequences in that respect. And having some accountability in the world of non-governmental citizens and employers, I was saying, is important. It's also important, I was saying, at some institutions, that you should not be punished for your opinion. Some institutions, like universities, that are supposed to be bastions of freedom of thought and expression, that's their whole point. They don't have to be, but many of them have said, yes, we are that. And that's a good thing. And you should not suffer consequences for expressing an opinion as a student or a professor. That's what I've told you. But that's not the same as saying that law firms don't have to hire you. Now what Teddy does, he adds one more thing and asks about doxing. How about these trucks that are going around with the names of the students on them? I find that a difficult question, by the way. I don't think that's easy. But I'm not sure I'm against it. Certainly the Constitution doesn't prevent it. And no laws that I know of prevent it. People, as Professor Dershowitz says, that doxing at least allows us to judge the people who have said such things. And judging people, condemning them if we think they've said vile stuff, that's part of what the freedom of speech is about. You say what you think. It's not that, oh, I have to agree with everything somebody says. No. If you think it's vile, you should condemn them. And that's what these doxing people are doing. Now, when you publish somebody's name and their address, then you're starting to get into very different territory, because you are encouraging people to go to their house and intimidate, and who knows, maybe break into that house. So that's where I would draw the line. And that happens all the time, by the way, and the government doesn't protect everybody. For example, Supreme Court justices who have been faced with that kind of behavior. But that's where I would draw the line. If this doxing truck was publishing their names and their addresses, and then if they were saying, as people have, go to their home. So I'm against that. But just the names, not so sure I'm against. In fact, I think I'm in favor. Kevin was going to be next.
I think, well, first and foremost, thank you. I think one of the core fears around free speech, safety, et cetera, especially for religiously persecuted minorities, ethnic minorities, gays, et cetera, is hate crimes. Do you anticipate that AUSAs, the Department of Justice, et cetera, will start exercising more discretion in prosecuting so-called hate crimes against bad actors who, engage in whatever crime that may be attached to hate speech?
Okay, great question. So what I have been talking about mostly for the last 45 minutes is hate speech. And I've been saying that that's protected constitutionally against governmental reprisal. But Kevin's asked about hate crimes. What are hate crimes? Hate crimes is when you actually commit an act of violence, but you choose your victim on the basis of their race or gender or religion or ethnicity. That's a hate crime. Go to jail for that. That's not free speech. That's not protected by freedom of speech. But Kevin is asking, are you asking whether I think there should be more, or just whether I predict there'll be more prosecutions for hate crimes?
Let's make it over. Do you think there should be more?
Yeah, I'm in favor of prosecuting people for hate crimes. So, but it should be done even-handedly. You should not have disparities where they prosecute hate crimes for some victims, but not for others. That's what I see as the problem. I mean, you all know that hate crimes against Muslims and Jews have risen enormously in the last several weeks. And I absolutely think that every single person who does anything like that, how about this guy who killed those 3 Palestinian students up in, New Hampshire, Vermont? Where? Shot. Excuse me.
What happened? They're alive?
Oh, they're all alive. Sorry. So, I mean, assuming that it was a hate crime, which, we don't know, of course he should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. It is a horror in America. But as long as it's done even-handedly, yes, I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. I wanted to pull on a thread from your talk of the inverted ideals of this movement. I was wondering if you had a sense of historical context of similar type movements, hatred for the foundation of the country, and kind of how those either fizzled or kind of where those movements led.
Well, that's a great question, and I'm no historian, so I don't have a competent answer for you. All the great powers on earth they've never survived for that long. Rome survived long. Rome tore itself apart. America is tearing itself apart. Why it's happening? It's not so clear why it's happening, but we're doing it. We still have the strongest military. We're declining every year, but we still have the strongest military, but we're tearing ourselves apart. We're not being beaten by an external enemy. And I'm not sure, but I think what you're living through may be unprecedented in terms of such a prosperous, successful country being so maligned, having an ideology that's against the country's values and against the country itself, being taught widely throughout schools, both public and private, including elementary schools. What the hell is going on? I think it may be unprecedented, and I don't know if we'll survive it. Which is, part of why it's so important to me to make this talk into a call upon you. It's your fight. If you don't fight for it, if you don't fight for your country and the Constitution, you might just lose it. Professor Smith was raising his hand.
I didn't know I had a kindred spirit in the law school, but okay, good. I've been thinking about this doxing issue.
More than one.
More than one. I've been thinking about, I was interested in the doxing issue, which I've been thinking about quite a bit as I've read about it. I was out of town, I didn't see the doxing truck. I feel I'm against putting students up on these trucks for kind of public shaming. Why? Because, as loathsome as many of the comments are, we were all 19 or 20 years old once, and we are, in a certain sense, entitled to having stupid ideas without having these turned into examples for public shaming. What I do believe, however, is that these professors should be the ones on these doxing trucks. This loathsome Zarina Graywall, why isn't she there as the #1 anti-Semite? Why isn't the head of Pearson College on there? And a dozen others I could name, and we could all name. Those are the ones who should be called out because they're using their positions of power. They're misusing their positions of power to politicize the campus. They have, most of them are, I don't know about this Graywall woman, most of them are tenured already, so they're protected by this. But they're the ones who should be called out, not some 20-year-old who probably doesn't know how to spell Palestine, you know. And I was just curious what you thought about putting the onus on the faculty, who in many ways are the ones who are the incubators and of this.
Well, I'm with you about the professors. I wouldn't mind if their names were put on those doxing trucks. I'd be totally happy about that. And as I said, the doxing of students, I find it a harder question too, but here's what I'll say. So some student groups took positions right after October 7th, pro-Hamas, celebrating it, justifying it. You should not dox the members of those student groups. Because if you know how these student groups work at these colleges, the students who are members of those groups, they don't know what the leaders of those groups, they don't know what statements they're putting out. The leaders of those groups are often like the worst people. And the students have no idea. And see, not all of them, but so they don't know. And so you should not, so you dox those people, that's not fair. Because they have no idea what their leaders, what the leaders of those groups are putting out. But if it's where students have signed their name to a statement saying, in effect, Israel should be wiped off the face of the map, Stephen, I'm just not sure. They put their name to that. I think you can put their name on a truck. Okay, I am not sure. I think it's harder. We all said, I said incredibly stupid things. I thought incredibly stupid things at that age, but I wasn't calling for genocide. So we may disagree on that.
I don't think there's room. Yeah. Sorry. When I wanted to introduce a. To who? What do you want to say? There. Where are these photos come? Yeah, I know. I've been working on this hair just for that. I want to introduce a paradox about free speech and get your thoughts on it. Whenever I've found myself outside of the U.S., I always feel far more at liberty to speak, and I found myself in places with so far away from having any free speech protections, even China, even places like that, you are at total liberty when you're just in a group with people to say thoughts that here I couldn't even say to people in this room, and they would raise an eyebrow. But you could take the point and make it within America too. When I leave this campus, if you go to Louis' lunch, in a late evening, you can find more free speech there than you can in probably any classroom. Here, even with my closest advisors, you can probably find even more free speech, in just any other, in a Wendy's, whatever, go somewhere. So I guess the paradox here is this: where there is more formal free speech protection, and when there's formal authorities in charge with maintaining free speech protections, like the tenure process and the university, it seems to be those are the places where we find the least amount of free speech actually possible, and the least amount of interest in speaking freely. So I wonder, it seems that the worry here is less, I appreciate the very strident defense of the Constitution and maintaining that, but it seems that the worry here...
When somebody calls you strident, you gotta check your pocketbook.
I think that the worry here is at the informal level. So it's when you're talking peer to peer, this is colleague to colleague,
okay, I got you.
The policing happens on
I'm
a
gonna
personal
stop you.
level, not on a formal
so
level.
I'm way older than you, and here's what I would say. You're seeing America as it is now. And you're not wrong. But this started happening a finite number of years ago. In fact, oddly, like it was around, for me, in my experience, it was around 2015. Students started coming into my office for the first time. I don't know if Professor Stith will have had the same experience. And they shut the door. And they said, I can't say what I think at Yale Law School. I can't express my opinion. I was like, what? I didn't understand it because it wasn't like that before. So the paradox you're saying, it wasn't the case that here in America where we have so much free speech protection, nobody can say anything. Maybe the 1950s, similar, McCarthy era, but it wasn't like that for decades. I didn't understand what the guy was talking about. We didn't have the term cancel culture. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had to ask him to explain. And he was a Special Forces veteran. And he said to me, you know, this is going to sound boastful, but I have been in many times in my life, I've been in situations with bullets flying over my head, and I was never afraid. That's what he said. I said, I don't know why, just that way, I was never afraid. And here at Yale Law School, I'm afraid. That's what he said. And I couldn't understand. Now, what he meant was, he'd done service for his country, but he was planning to like go into a career in politics. That was his hope, but he was centrist. He wasn't right. He wasn't far right conservative. He was just a centrist guy, and he couldn't say what he thought. And he felt that if he said what he thought, that would be the end of his career. He wouldn't be able to network. He would be ostracized. I didn't get it because we didn't have the terms. Do you know what I said to this Special Forces guy? And I am embarrassed about it to this day. I said, man up. I said, what are you talking about? Of course you can say what you think. Just be courageous. Like, I didn't get it. Now I get it. People at Yale Law School do not say what they think. Professors who are tenured do not say what they think. They come into my office too, and they shut the door, and they say, Jed, I can't say what I think. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're tenured. But believe me, I understand now what they were talking about. So you're seeing a slice. So I don't accept the premise of the question, and it's a terrible thing, and it's what I'm fighting against. And you know, I hope sometime in the not too distant future, it won't be like this in this country again. And I think what Shmuley and Toby are trying to do here at Shabtai is an important part of that, and I wish that the university would take its cue from you all, and you know, maybe we'd do a little better.
I want to comment on it. I think it's a great question and add something to your response. So I had a conversation with a student in my home on a Sunday morning, a 3-hour conversation 2 weeks ago from an East Asian country. And he said to me, you know, when I came to Yale, he's a senior now, and a fairly successful Yale undergrad. And he said, you know, when I came to Yale and over my tenure at Yale as a student, I thought when I left, I'd be able to count my close friends on one hand. And he says, I'm, you know, a semester and a half away from graduating, and I'm afraid that, and this is a very popular guy, that if I have to count my true friends on one finger, I'd have to really look deeply. And he says, it makes me think a lot about what happened on this campus over the last 3.5 years. And he said that so much of the discourse on this campus, and I say this to all of us in the room, every single one of you who I really love, as you know, and we love, and this is a society of love in this house here on Orange Street. He said, so much of the discourse on this campus is superficial. And because the discourse is superficial, our relationships are superficial. And he's talking among students, and because we say what we think is popular, or we say what we think is the talk of the day or the soundbite of the day, we're not actually being honest. And as you move towards the end of your time at Yale, you realize, because you get smarter and you get older and you get more mature, that the relationships are not as deep as you think they are. And I said to him, I'll tell you this, and you could say the same, Professor, and all the faculty here. I speak to the alumni, Toby and I, as the adults in this room, or the people that have been on this campus for decades or more have been on this room. It's much worse than you think. When you graduate, you're going to find out how few real, true friends you actually had on this campus. There are exceptions. If you're an athlete, maybe. There are exceptions, maybe, if you're in a fraternity, or if you're in a very small, tight reading group, or a very small, tight political union group, or whatever, very, very small groups. But the number of real, true friends. I was at a wedding this week of an alum of Yale College who graduated 26 years ago with Toby, his first child. He was marrying off his first child. And I looked around the room and I noticed there wasn't one classmate of his from Yale in the room. And it made me cry for a moment. I really shed a tear. Because I remember how popular he thought he was when he was on campus. And I said, wow, it's 26 years later. How many of his classmates came to see him marry off his first child? So I want to end my few minutes here, and I know we have a few more minutes and maybe time for one or two more questions, by saying this. If you want to liberate yourselves, if we want to liberate ourselves, all of us, if we want to really be free, if we want to get out of therapy, get off the meds, and sleep a normal sleep, and not be stressed, and not be anxious, and not worry, and actually fly the way human beings under the great American Constitution should be able to fly as free people, true freedom, start saying what you actually think, and start in your small circles, and argue, and be prepared to debate and to say what you think. If there's one thing you can learn from the radicals that run these rallies, I've stood up in front of their faces, in front of their marches. If there's one thing you can learn, one positive thing you can learn from a terrible thing that occurs, they're somewhat brave. They're somewhat brave. I mean, the nerve to walk across Yale's campus with 100 people behind you and call for the annihilation of the Jewish people. But you know what? They got balls. You know what? And when you look them in the eye and you call them out on it, they can't look you in the eye. When you actually confront them and you stare in their human eyes, we all have the same eyes. You stare at them for a second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds, and you want to actually argue the point with them. Do you believe that women should be raped, or do you believe that Jews should be annihilated? Most human beings, even the ones running those rallies, and even the informed ones that are bigots and anti-Semites, I'm not talking about the misinformed ones, have a hard time. And it's a wonderful, liberating experience, and I will say this to you all tonight. It may be the most liberating thing you experience in your time at Yale, because that's what the university was created for. If we can't argue and debate and discuss and discourse and polemicize and have a true conversation with people we agree with and with people we disagree with, we are slaves. And we're in bondage, and we're not free. So I would just cherish the moment that if everybody walks out of this room tonight with an absolute historical evening, evidenced by the fact that there isn't a seat in this room that's empty, not one, evidenced by the fact that this happened very, very quickly, it means that we are interested in this conversation. Free speech and genocide, those are two very, very different, dramatic things. And they came together tonight. If every one of us walks out of this room tonight, it makes a resolution, a strong resolution, to say, you know what, I'm going to actually start saying what I think, I'm going to write what I think, I'm going to talk about what I think and what I believe and what my convictions are. And I may be mistaken about a lot of those things. And I may need to learn a lot about those things. And I may need to do more of the reading on those things. And I may need to hear another perspective. And I may need to sit down with a Palestinian and talk about the life and the challenges of people that live in different places in the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is going to be the most emotionally, psychologically, intellectually liberating part of your Yale experience, because it's going to shape every other aspect of your education, of our education. We all learn from each other every day. And it's going to inform our psyche. The reason this country is drugged, and the reason this country, one of the major, most paramount reasons why this country is suffering mental illness, is because we have been silenced. And the human being was not created to be silenced. We were created to think freely and to speak freely. And I think that we need to make that resolution tonight. And you may lose a few friends along the way. And I was telling Professor Rubenfeld tonight, telling Stephen Smith, we may lose a few friends along the way, but you're going to pick up a lot of people that you didn't know were your friends. You're going to identify who those people you thought your friends were that aren't your friends. And you're going to be free. because you're going to have that courage and you're going to be respected. You're going to be respected. I respect that girl who walks across this campus with 100 people in tow, even if 50 of them she picked up at, in the parking lot of Walmart and paid to come to a rally on Yale's campus. I don't care. I respect her because she's standing up for what she may actually believe in, and she does it brazenly. And I want to confront her. I want to see her. And I bring her right here tomorrow night and have her tell us all her views. And that's what we do here, which is why you're all here. Because those of you who have been in this building before know that that's what we do. Those of you who know what this institution stands for, because whether you're here for the first time or you've been here before, many of you have, that's what our reputation is. That's what the Academy is supposed to be. So I want to thank you and just support that effort that we make the resolution. Imagine that. There's 100 people in the room here tonight. 100 people leave this room tonight and say, you know what, I'm going to change the way I voice my opinion and the way I write. Half of Yale Law School doesn't comment on Facebook because they're worried about what someone's going to say in 15 years about what they wrote on Facebook. Well, you know what? If you can't say what you believe today on Facebook, then in 15 years, no one's going to be caring about what you have to say about anything because you've got it all wrong. It's the people that actually voice their opinions and sometimes retract and apologize for things they said. But if you can't express yourself and you're at the best law school in the country, you're lame. You're a fool. You're weak. And it's just a matter of time until the partner at the law firm realizes you're weak and tells you to get the hell out. Because we don't need people like that around here if we're running a bank or we're running an institution or we're running a medical center. If you can't critique the guy next to you and save the person's life or argue in front of a judge and in front of a jury and defend somebody, if you can't get it out, you're not for us. Go to community college. Who's next? College. I should confess, I dropped out of high school.
Thank you so much for your remarks, Professor Rubenfeld. My question is, I feel like with the issue of free speech and a lot of the themes you hit on, is this idea that America in this moment, as we're becoming more diverse, you could say becoming a multiracial democracy, we're struggling with that process, right, on the left and the right, and there doesn't seem to be like a clear solution. I'm curious if you have a set of principles that you think can kind of guide us to kind of unite people in that lens, or if you don't, you're a law professor, so you read a lot, if there are certain texts that you think we can read to start to get an understanding of how we can kind of change the climate moving forward.
Well, that's a great question. You know, when America was founded, it wasn't so much, what was tearing all of Europe and America apart was religious division. So depending on what sect or religion you believed in, you faced persecution, maybe death, maybe imprisonment. The idea of America was that each person would be a citizen of this country, united by the Constitution, despite belonging to a group that hated some other group and that was hated by some other groups. And we all know what America did racially then and for a long time thereafter. But what I'm saying to you is it's the American Constitution that is the best blueprint and guide on earth for dealing with multi-group democracies. I don't think there's a better one. And, if we can't do it, if we can't work it out here, the world's in big trouble. So, in America, you can be an Irish American, you can be a Chinese American. You can't exactly be an Irish Italian. You can't exactly be a Chinese Japanese. It is rare. What we have done in America, you can belong to Group X and be Group X American and still be American. That's the model. That's what we've got. That's what almost nobody else has. And we've got to manage that for our racial divisions the way we've tried to do it for religious divisions and ethnic divisions. And I know we all know how bad America's been on that score, but that's the model, I'd say. So, I'm a constitutional law professor. The answer I'm giving is the Constitution. So, but that's what I'm saying.
Thank you for this. To what extent do your thoughts regarding hate speech and diversity, equity, inclusion in universities extend to elementary and high schools?
Extend to elementary and high schools is the question. What?
There's also a lot of anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just appalled by what is being taught at some of our elementary schools and high schools. I'm going to imagine that you are too. So just give me another 15 seconds. What question are you asking me?
Well, I understand why university professors get a lot of free speech protections.
Ah, okay.
Do you think it should also apply to elementary school
Gotcha.
professors?
Okay. That's a great question, Ilan. There's a lot, it's actually a non-trivial question in constitutional law to figure out whether the protections given to professors, the free speech protection should also apply to a grade school teacher. And especially like at public schools. The truth is that public schools have always had a mission to inculcate kids with a particular set of values. It used to be, liking America, civics, patriotism, Pledge of Allegiance. And that was always part of the job of grade school teachers. They weren't understood to be free to teach the opposite of that. For example, teaching racism. After a certain point, they weren't allowed to do that anymore because that was un-American. So it's always been understood that grade school teachers, especially public schools, are not allowed to just teach any values they want. I mean, the thing is, yeah, they do have freedom of speech, but whether they're exercising their own freedom of speech when they teach a class, a grade school class, is actually a very tricky question in constitutional law. And grade school teachers have never been understood to have the right and freedom to teach racism or whatever they might want. No, they can't do it. They don't have a constitutional right to do that. So I'm not giving you a very satisfactory answer. It's a tough question, but there's much more room for insisting that they teach a set of values that they're being told to teach by whether it's a school board or the mayor or the parents association or whoever's making those decisions is going to tell grade school teachers they're going to put limits on it, and nobody has ever thought that was a constitutional problem before. That's the best I can do.
Professor, I have one last question for you.
Okay, but so does Marina.
Sorry.
So we need to fight for this. We should duel.
I couldn't see you. Okay, sorry, I couldn't see you through the poll. Do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Well, thank you, Professor, for your speech, which I thought was brilliant, by the way. What I was curious about, you called out the...
You might want to stand up. Not sure they can hear you.
Okay, I'll stand up. So you called out the problem of anti-Semitism on college campuses, which I agree is a great problem and in many cases is uniquely anti-Semitism. I think there's also the more general or broader problem of anti-whiteness on college campuses, which has been allowed to go unchecked, unfettered for several years without any mention. I was wondering if you had any comments on that.
Well, I think it's a good question, and I think America's going to have to start grappling with that a lot more explicitly than it has in the past. I think a lot of white people feel that way, and I think they have some reason to worry about the rise in anti-white sentiments in the United States. I'm not convinced about how big a problem it is, but I think it's there. And I think we make a mistake if we hide our eyes from it. And when affirmative action was the giving of benefits to groups that needed it, that was one thing. When it turned into an anti-Asian quota, that's another. That's not good. What's the basis of a quota is the idea that it's not good to have more than a certain number of that group at your institution. It's bad for the institution to have too many Asians, was apparently the view of the Ivy League for the last 15 years. And that is just discrimination. Is there a comparable view about whites in America at this time? It's a serious issue. Affirmative action, if affirmative action, for example, is based on the idea that it's just bad for an institution to have too many whites because they tend to be racist or too privileged or see things a certain way, that's an invidious stereotyping of a racial group. We used to all know what it means, what to call it when you invidiously stereotype a racial group. We called that racism. That wasn't the way affirmative action began. If that's what it's turned into, then that's a problem, because that is anti-white prejudice. I'm not convinced that that's as huge a problem as the talking points on the right would say it is, but I think it's a serious issue. I think there was one more question over here.
Yes. Thank you, Professor. A significant amount of time today you've talked about how the First Amendment only protects free speech by the government and discrimination by the government against people for free speech. A significant amount of the discourse around this issue is taking place online on social media platforms, such as, for example, the tweets that you mentioned earlier. What is the responsibility of these platforms to moderate that content, this disinformation and misinformation and hate speech? How do you feel about that? That was my question.
Well, you're asking a question near to my heart, because I litigate these cases all over the country, so I don't want to bore you with it, but I think, we have a problem in this country when, social media is the modern public square, as the Supreme Court puts it, and when you can't express certain opinions on social media, I think that's a problem. For like 6 months in 2020, you could not say on any major social media platform that COVID might have originated in a lab in Wuhan, China. You could not say that. If you said that, your post was taken down. If you said it a couple more times, your account was canceled. Just saying, you think it might have. Couldn't say, my feeling was, what country are we living in when people cannot state facts or express their opinions about facts in the public square? That's not the America I knew. But social media companies are private companies. They're not bound by the Constitution. They can, unless, state laws in Florida or Texas stop them, they can, as far as the Constitution goes, moderate, police for disinformation, police for hate speech. But I'm very worried when they do, because I don't think the results have been, I don't think they should lead us to have a lot of confidence and faith in the folks making those decisions. They end up too often being viewpoint discriminatory and information suppressing. Constitutionally speaking, it becomes a problem when the government gets involved and helps them suppress information or viewpoints. If the government's doing that, and it now turns out, yes, they are, and have been for the last 24 months very intensively, that's unconstitutional. So that's a real problem. Keep your eye out for that. But if it's just the social media platforms themselves, under American constitutional law, it's not a constitutional violation. But I think we should be very nervous about it, because you got a couple of trillionaire corporations with more wealth than any corporations have had ever in American history, and maybe in world history, deciding what viewpoints hundreds of millions of Americans can say or see or utter every day. And I'd be very nervous about that.
Yes, I just want to please join me again in thanking Professor Rubenfeld for a wonderful talk.